The millionaire froze in the middle of the sidewalk, unable to breathe. There on the grimy pavement stood her, his beloved, missing for 7 years, unrecognizable, barefoot, dressed in rags, with 2 small children by her side. But what truly knocked the ground out from under him was one detail he couldn't ignore. The twins had faces identical to his. He approached, his heart pounding as if it might burst from his chest, but her words revealed a secret so devastating that his life would never be the same again. The gleaming skyscrapers of Manhattan cast long shadows across the bustling streets below as Griffin Bennett's sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided through the early morning traffic. Inside the opulent vehicle, Griffin sat alone, his piercing blue eyes fixed on the financial reports displayed on his tablet. At 38, he was the epitome of success, CEO of Bennett Enterprises, a Fortune 500 company with tentacles reaching into every lucrative market imaginable. As the car pulled up to the towering glass edifice that housed his corporate empire, Griffin straightened his bespoke Armani suit and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The doorman greeted him with a respectful nod. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett." Griffin barely acknowledged the man as he strode purposefully through the revolving doors and into the vast marble-floored lobby. To the casual observer, Griffin Bennett had it all. His net worth was estimated at over $2 billion. He graced the covers of business magazines, and his opinion was sought after by world leaders and industry titans alike. Yet, as he rode the private elevator to his penthouse office on the 78th floor, a familiar emptiness gnawed at his insides. 7 years. It had been 7 long years since Naomi disappeared, without a trace on the eve of their wedding. The memory of that day still haunted him, a persistent shadow that no amount of wealth or success could dispel. As the elevator doors slid open, revealing his immaculate office with its panoramic views of the city, Griffin's mind drifted back to that fateful morning. He had woken up filled with anticipation, ready to marry the love of his life. Naomi Evans, with her radiant smile and infectious laughter, had been the light in his world. She came from a modest background, working as a kindergarten teacher when they met, but her warmth and genuine spirit had captured Griffin's heart instantly. In her, he had found a partner who saw beyond his wealth, someone who challenged him to be a better man. But as the hours ticked by and Naomi failed to appear at the church, that joy had turned to confusion, then panic, and finally, a deep, all-consuming despair. Despite hiring the best private investigators money could buy and using every connection at his disposal, Naomi had vanished without a trace. No ransom demands, no body found, just a gaping hole in Griffin's life that seemed impossible to fill. Griffin's assistant Sarah interrupted his reverie as he settled behind his expansive mahogany desk. "Mr. Bennett, your 9 a.m. with the board is in 5 minutes. Shall I have some coffee sent in?" "Black, 2 sugars," Griffin replied curtly, his mask of cool professionalism sliding back into place. As Sarah retreated, he allowed himself one last moment of vulnerability, his eyes lingering on the small silver-framed photo hidden in the bottom drawer of his desk, Naomi's smiling face frozen in time. With a deep breath, Griffin locked away his emotions and turned his attention to the day ahead. Board meetings, merger negotiations, and strategy sessions filled his calendar, leaving little room for introspection. This was his life now, a relentless pursuit of success and power that left him exhausted but never truly satisfied. As evening fell, Griffin found himself in the back of his Rolls-Royce once again, this time headed to a charity gala. These events were a necessary evil in his world, a chance to network, make deals and maintain his image as a philanthropist. The car wound its way through the city, passing glittering storefronts and Michelin-starred restaurants. Griffin's phone buzzed with a message from his younger brother, Ethan. "Hey G, you coming to Mom's birthday dinner next week? She's asking again." Griffin's jaw clenched. His relationship with his family had become strained in the years following Naomi's disappearance. They had never approved of her, viewing her as a gold digger unworthy of the Bennett name. In the darkest corners of his mind, Griffin sometimes wondered if they had played a role in her vanishing, though he quickly dismissed such thoughts as paranoid fantasies. "I'll be there," he typed back, already dreading the forced smiles and stilted conversation that awaited him. The gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, its grand steps lined with paparazzi and socialites in designer gowns. Griffin plastered on his media smile as he made his way inside, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries with New York's elite. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, a glass of champagne in hand, discussing stock prices and vacation homes as if they were the most fascinating topics in the world. It wasn't until well past midnight that Griffin finally returned to his penthouse apartment in the Upper East Side. The space was immaculate and tastefully decorated, with priceless art adorning the walls and floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a breathtaking view of Central Park. Yet as he loosened his bow tie and poured himself a glass of 30-year-old Macallan, the emptiness of the place seemed to mock him. Griffin wandered out onto the balcony, the cool night air a welcome respite from the stifling atmosphere of the gala. Below him the city pulsed with life, couples walking hand in hand, taxis ferrying late-night revelers, the distant thrum of music from a rooftop party. He felt disconnected from it all, as if watching the world through a thick pane of glass. As he sipped his whiskey, Griffin's thoughts turned once again to Naomi. What would their life have been like if she hadn't disappeared? Would they have children by now? Would he still be the hard-driving CEO? Or would her influence have softened his edges, redirected his ambitions? A shooting star streaked across the sky, and for a moment, Griffin felt a childish urge to make a wish. Instead, he drained his glass and headed inside. Tomorrow would be another day of meetings, deals, and carefully maintained facades. Another day of pretending that the hole in his heart wasn't slowly consuming him from the inside out. Little did Griffin know that fate was about to throw him a curveball that would shatter his carefully constructed world and force him to confront the ghosts of his past. As he drifted off to sleep in his king-sized bed, surrounded by luxury but utterly alone, the wheels of destiny were already in motion. In less than 24 hours, a chance encounter would reignite the spark of hope he had long thought extinguished and set him on a path that would challenge everything he thought he knew about love, family, and the true meaning of wealth. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect spring day in the city. Griffin went through his usual routine, an intense workout in his private gym, a breakfast of organic steel-cut oats and fresh berries prepared by his personal chef, and a quick scan of the financial news before heading to the office. As his car navigated through the morning traffic, Griffin's mind was occupied with the upcoming merger he was orchestrating. It was a deal that would consolidate his company's position in the tech sector and likely add another few $100 million to his net worth. Yet, as he mentally rehearsed his presentation for the board, a nagging feeling of dissatisfaction persisted. It wasn't until lunchtime that Griffin's carefully ordered world began to unravel. He had a rare gap in his schedule, and on a whim, decided to walk to a nearby deli he used to frequent years ago. As he strode down the bustling sidewalk, his phone buzzed with messages and emails, each demanding his immediate attention. Lost in thought, Griffin almost walked past the small group huddled near the entrance of an alley. It was a common enough sight in the city, the homeless and destitute, invisible to most of the suits rushing by. But something made Griffin pause, his hand frozen midway to his pocket, where he kept a few bills for such encounters. Time seemed to slow as his eyes locked onto a familiar face among the group, dirty, gaunt, with tangled hair and clothes that had seen better days, but unmistakable all the same. It was Naomi. Griffin's heart thundered in his chest, his breath catching in his throat. For a moment he thought he must be hallucinating, a trick of the light perhaps, or his mind finally cracking under the weight of years of suppressed grief. But as he stared, unable to move or speak, Naomi's eyes met his. There was a flash of recognition, followed quickly by fear. Naomi clutched two small girls to her sides, twins by the look of them, no more than 6 or 7 years old. Before Griffin could react, she turned and started to hurry away, pulling the children along with her. "Naomi!" Griffin's voice cracked as he called out, finally finding the strength to move. He pushed through the crowd, heedless of the startled looks and annoyed mutters around him. "Naomi, wait!" But she was already gone, swallowed up by the sea of pedestrians and the labyrinthine streets of New York City. Griffin stood there, rooted to the spot, his mind reeling. She was alive. After all these years, Naomi was alive. And those children, could they be? As the implications of what he had just witnessed began to sink in, Griffin felt the carefully constructed pillars of his life begin to crumble. Nothing else mattered now. Not the merger, not the billions in his bank account, not the empire he had built. In that moment, Griffin Bennett, the titan of industry, the man who seemed to have everything, realized that he had been living a half-life all these years. With shaking hands, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Jack, it's Griffin Bennett. I need your help. Find her. Find Naomi." As he ended the call, Griffin looked up at the towering skyscrapers around him, symbols of the power and wealth he had accumulated. For the first time in 7 years, he felt truly alive, filled with a purpose that went beyond profit margins and stock prices. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, he would find Naomi and uncover the truth behind her disappearance. The game had changed, and Griffin Bennett was ready to risk it all to reclaim the love he had lost and the life he never knew he could have. The next 48 hours were a blur of frantic activity for Griffin. He cancelled all his appointments, much to the shock of his executive team, and threw himself into the search for Naomi with a fervor that bordered on obsession. Jack Reeves, the private investigator he had hired years ago to find Naomi, was back on the case, combing through security footage and tapping into his network of informants throughout the city. Griffin barely slept, his mind racing with questions and possibilities. Why had Naomi run? Who were those children with her? And most importantly, what had happened 7 years ago to make her disappear without a trace? It was on the evening of the second day that Jack's team finally got a lead. A homeless shelter in the Bronx had reported a woman matching Naomi's description, checking in with 2 young girls. Griffin's heart raced as he sped through the city in his Aston Martin, the plush leather interior a stark contrast to the gritty streets he now found himself navigating. As he pulled up to the shelter, a nondescript brick building with peeling paint and barred windows, Griffin felt a moment of hesitation. This world was so far removed from his usual haunts of boardrooms and 5-star hotels. But the thought of Naomi being so close steeled his resolve. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of disinfectant and despair. Griffin approached the front desk, where a tired-looking woman eyed him suspiciously. "I'm looking for someone," he began, his voice low and urgent. "A woman named Naomi, with 2 young girls." The woman's eyes narrowed. "We don't give out information about our residents, mister." "Privacy policy." Griffin reached for his wallet, ready to offer a bribe, but stopped himself. Money wouldn't help him here. Instead, he took a deep breath and let his carefully constructed facade crumble. "Please," he said, his voice cracking. She's my wife. We've been separated for years. I just want to make sure she's okay." Something in his tone must have convinced her, because after a long moment, the woman sighed and nodded towards a doorway. "Community rooms down the hall." "But I didn't tell you nothing, you hear?" Griffin's heart pounded as he made his way down the dimly lit corridor. As he approached the community room, he could hear the muffled sounds of conversation and children playing. He paused at the threshold, suddenly unsure of himself. What if Naomi didn't want to see him? What if she ran again? But before he could retreat, a small figure darted out of the room and collided with his legs. Griffin looked down to see a little girl with bright blue eyes that mirrored his own, staring up at him curiously. "You look like the man in Mommy's picture," she said matter-of-factly. Griffin felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. This child, with her familiar eyes and the curve of her chin that was so like Naomi's, could she really be his daughter? "Lily," a voice called from inside the room, a voice that Griffin would have recognized anywhere, despite the years that had passed. "Lily, where did you go?" And then Naomi was there, framed in the doorway, another little girl clinging to her hand. She froze when she saw Griffin, her face a mixture of fear, shock, and something else. Longing, perhaps. "Griffin," she whispered, her voice barely audible. How did you find us?" The next few moments were a whirlwind of emotion. Griffin found himself ushered into a small private room off the main area, with Naomi and the 2 girls, twins, he now realized, seated across from him. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and years of separation. It was Naomi who finally broke the silence. "These are your daughters, Griffin," she said softly, her hands resting protectively on the girls' shoulders. "Lily and Rose. They're 6 years old." Griffin felt as if he had been hit by a truck. He had suspected, of course, from the moment he saw the girls, but hearing it confirmed was overwhelming. He looked at the twins, really looked at them, and saw himself reflected in their features. His eyes, his nose, even the way Lily tilted her head as she regarded him curiously. Why? The question escaped him before he could stop it, laden with 7 years of pain and confusion. "Why did you leave, Naomi? Why didn't you tell me about them?" Naomi's eyes filled with tears and she hugged the girls closer to her. I didn't have a choice, she whispered. They threatened me, Griffin. They said they would hurt the babies if I didn't disappear. Who threatened you? Griffin demanded, his mind racing. Was it a rival company? Someone trying to get to me through you? Naomi shook her head, her expression a mixture of fear and resignation. It was your mother, Griffin. And your Uncle Charles. The revelation hit Griffin like a physical blow. His own family? He had always known they disapproved of Naomi, but to go to such lengths, it seemed impossible. And yet, as he thought back to the coldness in his mother's eyes whenever Naomi was mentioned, the way his uncle had always seemed to be watching her with calculation, a horrible suspicion began to take root in his mind. Tell me everything, he said, his voice low and intense. From the beginning. And so Naomi did. She spoke of the night before their wedding, when she had been planning to surprise Griffin with the news of her pregnancy, how she had been cornered by his mother and uncle, who had made it clear in no uncertain terms that a gold digger like her would never be allowed to trap Griffin with a child. They had presented her with a choice: disappear and never contact Griffin again, or face consequences that would endanger not only her life, but the lives of her unborn children. I was so scared, Griffin, Naomi said, her voice trembling. I knew how powerful your family was, how far their influence reached. I couldn't risk our babies' lives, so I ran. As Naomi recounted her years of struggle, moving from city to city, working multiple jobs to keep the girls fed and clothed, always looking over her shoulder for fear of being found, Griffin felt a maelstrom of emotions. Rage at his family for their cruelty, heartbreak for the years of hardship Naomi and his daughters had endured, and an overwhelming sense of guilt for not having protected them. Why didn't you come to me? He asked, his voice hoarse. I would have protected you, all of you. Naomi's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of love and sorrow. I knew you would have tried, Griffin, but I also knew how ruthless your mother could be. I couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to you or the girls because of me. As Griffin absorbed this information, he found himself looking at the twins again. Lily, the bolder of the two, was watching him with open curiosity, while Rose clung shyly to her mother's side, his daughters. The thought filled him with a fierce protective love he had never experienced before. What happened recently? Griffin asked, realizing that something must have changed for Naomi to end up in New York again. Why are you here now? Naomi's face fell. We were in Chicago, she explained. I had a decent job. The girls were in school, but then Rose got sick, really sick. She needed surgery and I couldn't afford it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I thought about contacting you then, but I was so afraid. In the end, I sold everything we had and came back to New York. I thought maybe I could find work here, maybe even reach out to some of our old friends for help. Griffin felt his heart breaking all over again. To think of Naomi struggling alone, of his daughter being ill and him not knowing, not being able to help. It was almost more than he could bear. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice thick with emotion, for everything you've been through, for not finding you sooner, for my family's actions. But Naomi, please believe me when I say that ends now. I will do whatever it takes to protect you and our daughters. No one will ever threaten you again. As he made this vow, Griffin felt a steely determination settle over him. He would move heaven and earth to make things right, to give Naomi and the girls the life they deserved, and to uncover the full extent of his family's betrayal. But even as he made these silent promises, a part of him couldn't help but wonder, after 7 years apart, after all the pain and secrets between them, could he and Naomi ever recapture what they had lost? And how would his world, so carefully constructed around his solitude and business empire, accommodate this newfound family? As Griffin grappled with these questions, he knew one thing for certain: his life would never be the same again. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time in 7 years he felt truly alive, ready to fight for the love and family he had thought lost forever. As the reality of the situation sank in, Griffin's mind raced with possibilities. He couldn't undo the past 7 years, but he could damn well make sure that Naomi and their daughters never had to struggle again. With a deep breath, he made a decision that would alter the course of all their lives. Naomi, he said, his voice steady and determined, I want you and the girls to come with me right now. I have a penthouse in a secure building where you'll be safe while we figure things out. Will you trust me? Naomi hesitated, years of ingrained caution warring with the hope in her eyes. Griffin, I don't know. It's not that simple. We can't just— Mom, Lily interrupted, her small hand tugging at Naomi's sleeve. Can we go with him? He looks nice and I'm tired of being scared all the time. Those innocent words seemed to break something in Naomi. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at her daughters, then back at Griffin. Finally, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. Okay, we'll come. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Griffin made a flurry of calls, setting things in motion with the efficiency that had made him a titan of industry. By the time they left the shelter, a team of trusted security personnel had already been dispatched to sweep and secure his penthouse. As they rode the elevator up to the top floor of Griffin's building, the contrast between their current surroundings and the shelter they'd just left was stark. Rose and Lily pressed their faces against the glass, watching the city shrink beneath them with wide-eyed wonder. "This is where you live?" Naomi asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Griffin nodded, suddenly self-conscious of the opulence that surrounded them. "It's just a place," he said softly. "It never felt like home. Not really." The penthouse had been transformed in the short time since Griffin's calls. Fresh flowers adorned every surface, and the fridge was stocked with an array of foods. 2 of the guest rooms had been hastily converted into cheerful bedrooms for the girls, complete with new clothes and toys. As Naomi and the twins explored their new surroundings, Griffin retreated to his home office to make some crucial calls. First on the list was his head of security, Marcus. "I need a full background check on my mother and Uncle Charles," Griffin instructed, his voice low and intense. "Go back at least 8 years. I want to know everything. Financial transactions, phone records, travel history. If they so much as sneezed, I want to know about it." Next, he called his most trusted lawyer, Sarah Chen. "Sarah, I need you to draft up some documents. Full custody agreements, new wills, everything. And I need it done quietly. No one can know about this yet." As Griffin worked, he could hear the muffled sounds of laughter from the other room. The sound tugged at something deep in his chest, a longing for the family life he'd never known he wanted. Eventually, he emerged from his office to find Naomi tucking the girls into bed. He lingered in the doorway, watching as she kissed each of their foreheads. When she turned and saw him, her eyes were filled with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "They're wonderful," Griffin said softly as they moved into the living room. "I can't believe I've missed so much of their lives." Naomi settled onto the couch, looking small and vulnerable in the vast space. "Griffin, I don't know how to thank you for all of this. But what happens now? We can't hide here forever." Griffin sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Now we fight back," he said, his jaw set with determination. "I'm going to uncover every detail of what my mother and uncle did, and I'm going to make sure they can never threaten you or our daughters again." As he outlined his plans, the investigations, the legal preparations, the security measures, Griffin could see the weight lifting from Naomi's shoulders. For the first time since their reunion, she allowed herself to relax, if only slightly. "There's something else," Griffin added, his voice softening. "I want to get to know them, Naomi. Lily and Rose. I've missed so much, and I want to be their father, if you'll let me." Naomi's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were accompanied by a small smile. "Of course," she whispered. "They deserve to know you, Griffin. They deserve to have their father in their lives." The next morning dawned bright and clear, marking the beginning of a new chapter for all of them. Griffin woke early, his mind already racing with plans and contingencies. As he made his way to the kitchen for coffee, he was surprised to find Lily already awake, perched on a stool at the kitchen island. "Good morning," he said, suddenly nervous in the presence of this small person who shared his DNA. Lily regarded him solemnly. "Do you know how to make pancakes?" she asked. "Mom always makes them on Saturdays, but she's still sleeping." Griffin felt a surge of warmth in his chest. "I don't," he admitted, "but I'd love to learn. Want to help me figure it out?" What followed was a messy, laughter-filled adventure in pancake making. By the time Naomi and Rose joined them, the kitchen was covered in flour, and Griffin and Lily were proudly presenting a stack of slightly misshapen but delicious-smelling pancakes. As they sat down to their first family breakfast, Griffin couldn't help but marvel at how quickly his world had changed. Just days ago, he had been a solitary figure, driven by ambition but empty inside. Now, watching Naomi help Rose cut her pancakes and listening to Lily chatter about her favorite books, he felt a sense of purpose and belonging he had never known before. But even as he basked in this newfound happiness, Griffin knew that challenges lay ahead. His mother and uncle were powerful adversaries, and unraveling their web of deceit would not be easy. Moreover, he and Naomi had 7 years of pain and separation to work through, and the girls would need time to adjust to their new reality. As if sensing his thoughts, Naomi reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "We'll figure it out," she said softly. "Together." Griffin nodded, squeezing her hand in return. Whatever came next, they would face it as a family. And for the first time in years, Griffin Bennett felt truly, completely alive. As the days passed, Griffin found himself navigating the unfamiliar waters of fatherhood while simultaneously orchestrating a complex investigation into his family's betrayal. Each morning brought new challenges and unexpected joys. One particularly memorable afternoon, Griffin decided to take a break from his work to spend time with the girls. He found them in the living room, surrounded by a sea of colored pencils and paper. "What are you two up to?" he asked, crouching down beside them. Rose, the shyer of the twins, looked up at him with wide eyes. "We're drawing our family," she said softly, holding up a paper covered in stick figures. Griffin's heart swelled as he examined the drawing. There was Naomi, easily identifiable by her long hair, and 2 smaller figures that must be the twins. And there, standing beside them, was a tall figure with a big smile. "Is that me?" Griffin asked, his voice thick with emotion. Rose nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "You're our dad," she said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. In that moment, Griffin felt a surge of love and protectiveness so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. He gathered both girls into a gentle hug, blinking back tears. "That's right," he whispered. "I'm your dad, and I love you both very much." As the girls returned to their drawing, now eagerly explaining each detail to Griffin, he couldn't help but marvel at how quickly they had accepted him into their lives. Children, he realized, had an incredible capacity for love and forgiveness. Meanwhile, the investigation into his mother and uncle's actions was progressing rapidly. Marcus, his head of security, had uncovered a trail of suspicious financial transactions dating back to the weeks before Naomi's disappearance. Sarah Chen, his lawyer, was building a rock-solid case based on the mounting evidence. One evening, after the girls had been tucked into bed, Griffin sat down with Naomi to discuss the latest developments. They had fallen into a comfortable routine, sharing quiet moments like this after the chaos of the day had settled. "We've found something," Griffin began, his voice low and intense. "A series of large cash withdrawals from one of my uncle's offshore accounts, right around the time you disappeared. And there's more. Phone records showing multiple calls between my mother and a man we've identified as a known fixer in the city." Naomi paled at this information, her hands clasping tightly in her lap. "What does this mean, Griffin? What are you going to do?" Griffin reached out, covering her hands with his own. "It means we're close to having enough evidence to confront them legally. But Naomi, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the answer. Did my mother or uncle ever directly threaten you? Physically, I mean." Naomi's eyes filled with tears as she nodded slowly. "Your uncle," she whispered. He came to see me the night before I left. He had a gun, Griffin. He said if I didn't disappear, he'd make sure the babies and I had an accident." Rage boiled up inside Griffin, hot and furious. The thought of his uncle threatening Naomi, threatening his unborn children, made him want to tear the world apart. But he forced himself to remain calm for Naomi's sake. "I'm so sorry," he said, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that alone. But I promise you, they will never hurt you or our girls again. We're going to make this right." As Naomi cried softly against his shoulder, Griffin's mind raced with plans. This wasn't just about reclaiming his family anymore. It was about justice, about holding those responsible accountable for their actions. The next morning, Griffin made a decision that would irrevocably change the course of their lives. He called an emergency board meeting of Bennett Enterprises, gathering the company's top executives and major shareholders. Standing before them in the sleek conference room, Griffin took a deep breath. "I have an announcement to make," he began, his voice steady and resolute. "Effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO of Bennett Enterprises." A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the room. Griffin held up a hand for silence. "I've recently discovered some deeply troubling information about certain members of my family who are also major shareholders in this company. I cannot in good conscience continue to lead this organization until a full investigation has been conducted." He went on to outline the basics of the situation, careful not to reveal too much about Naomi and the girls. By the time he finished speaking, the room was in an uproar. Some executives were shouting questions, while others sat in stunned silence. As Griffin made his way out of the building, dodging reporters who had already gotten wind of the story, he felt a strange sense of liberation. For years, his work had been his entire life. Now he was walking away from it all for something far more important: his family. Back at the penthouse, he found Naomi waiting for him, her face etched with concern. "I saw the news," she said softly. "Griffin, are you sure about this? Your company, it's everything you've worked for." Griffin took her hands in his, looking into her eyes with a smile. "No, Naomi, you and the girls, you're everything. The company was just a way to fill the void you left. I'd give it up 1,000 times over to have this life with you." As they stood there, foreheads touching, both aware of the challenges that lay ahead but ready to face them together, Griffin felt a sense of peace settle over him. Whatever came next, legal battles, media scrutiny, the upheaval of his entire world, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. The sound of small feet pattering down the hallway broke the moment. Lily and Rose burst into the room, full of energy and excitement about their day at their new school. As Griffin scooped them up, one in each arm, their laughter filling the air, he knew with absolute certainty that he had made the right choice. This was just the beginning of their journey as a family. There would be obstacles to overcome, wounds to heal, and a past to reckon with. But as Griffin looked at Naomi and their daughters, he felt ready for whatever lay ahead. The man who had once measured his worth in dollars and stock prices now understood the true meaning of wealth, the love of family, the joy of second chances, and the unbreakable bonds forged through adversity. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in 7 years, Griffin Bennett was truly, completely alive, and he was ready to fight for the future he never knew he wanted, a future filled with love, laughter, and the precious gift of family. In the weeks that followed Griffin's dramatic resignation from Bennett Enterprises, the family settled into a new rhythm of life. The penthouse, once a symbol of Griffin's solitary existence, now buzzed with the energy of family life. Toys littered the living room floor, children's artwork adorned the refrigerator, and the sound of laughter echoed through the once quiet halls. For Griffin, each day brought new challenges and joys as he embraced his role as a father. He found himself waking early to help Naomi prepare breakfast for the girls, fumbling through the intricacies of braiding hair, and staying up late to read bedtime stories. It was a steep learning curve, but one he tackled with the same determination he had once applied to business deals. One sunny afternoon, Griffin decided to take the girls to Central Park. As they strolled along the winding paths, Lily and Rose skipping ahead and chattering excitedly about the ducks in the pond, Griffin felt a surge of emotion. He caught Naomi's eye, and she squeezed his hand, understanding without words the magnitude of this simple family outing. "Daddy, can we have ice cream?" Lily called out, pointing to a nearby vendor. The word daddy still sent a thrill through Griffin. "Of course, sweetheart," he replied, leading them towards the cart. As he watched the girls deliberate over their flavor choices with utmost seriousness, he couldn't help but marvel at how quickly they had accepted him into their lives. Later that evening, after the girls had been tucked into bed, Griffin found Naomi standing on the balcony, gazing out at the city lights. He joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked softly. Naomi leaned into him, sighing. "It's all so surreal, Griffin. Sometimes I wake up and can't believe this isn't a dream. After years of struggling, of always looking over my shoulder, it's hard to let my guard down." Griffin understood. While he had thrown himself wholeheartedly into their new life, he knew that for Naomi, the adjustment was more complex. Years of living in fear and uncertainty had left their mark. "I know it's not easy," he said, turning her to face him. "But I promise you, Naomi, you're safe now. We're safe, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you and the girls have everything you need." Tears glistened in Naomi's eyes as she looked up at him. "It's not about the money or the luxury, Griffin. It's having you back, watching you with the girls. I never thought we'd have this." As they stood there, the city sprawling out before them, Griffin felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had wealth beyond measure, but the true riches were right here in his arms. The following days brought new challenges as Naomi began to reacclimate to life in New York. After years of living hand-to-mouth, the abundance now surrounding her was overwhelming. Griffin noticed her hesitation to use the credit cards he'd given her, her reluctance to buy new clothes for herself, even as she eagerly shopped for the girls. One day he came home to find Naomi in tears, surrounded by shopping bags. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't mean to spend so much. It's just the girls needed new shoes, and then I saw this dress, and I thought, maybe for dinner next week." Griffin's heart ached. He gathered her in his arms, stroking her hair. "Naomi, listen to me. You have nothing to apologize for. This is your home, your life. You don't need to ask permission or feel guilty for buying things you want or need." He pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. "I know it's an adjustment, but I want you to understand something. Everything I have, every penny, every asset, it's ours. Yours, mine, and the girls. We're a family, and what's mine is yours. Always." As Naomi nodded, wiping away her tears, Griffin made a mental note to arrange for therapy sessions. The trauma of the past 7 years wouldn't disappear overnight, but with time and support, he was determined to help Naomi heal. Meanwhile, the investigation into his mother and uncle's actions continued to progress. Marcus, Griffin's head of security, had uncovered a trail of evidence that painted a damning picture. Bank records showed large sums of money being funneled through shell companies. Phone logs revealed frequent contact with known criminals. And most disturbingly, there were hints of other families who had been similarly threatened or coerced. Griffin pored over the reports late into the night, his anger growing with each new revelation. The wealth and power he had once admired in his family now seemed tainted, built on a foundation of threats and manipulation. One evening, as he sat in his home office reviewing the latest findings, there was a soft knock at the door. He looked up to see Rose standing there, clutching her favorite stuffed animal. "Daddy?" she said softly. "I had a bad dream." Griffin immediately set aside the papers, opening his arms. Rose climbed onto his lap, snuggling close. As he held her, murmuring words of comfort, Griffin felt a fierce protectiveness wash over him. This was what truly mattered. Not stock prices or business empires, but the trust of this small child in his arms. "It's okay, sweetheart," he whispered, kissing the top of her head. "Daddy's here. You're safe." As Rose's breathing evened out, Griffin found himself reflecting on his own childhood. He had grown up surrounded by wealth and privilege, but emotional warmth had been scarce. His mother's affection had always seemed conditional on his achievements, while his father had been a distant figure, more concerned with the family legacy than with his son's happiness. Now, holding his daughter, Griffin vowed to break that cycle. His children would grow up knowing they were loved unconditionally, valued for who they were, rather than what they could achieve. The next day, Griffin decided to take a more active role in the girls' education. He contacted their school, arranging to volunteer for their upcoming career day. The thought of speaking to a class of first graders was more daunting than any board meeting he'd ever faced, but he was determined to be present in every aspect of his daughters' lives. On the day of the event, Griffin found himself standing before a sea of eager young faces, including the beaming smiles of Lily and Rose in the front row. He had agonized over what to tell them about his career, conscious of the vast disparity between these children's backgrounds and the privileged world he had known. "Hello, everyone," he began, his voice warm. "I'm here to talk to you about something very important, dreams. You see, when I was your age, I dreamed of building things, big things that would change the world." He went on to explain in simple terms how he had started his company, the challenges he had faced and the successes he had achieved. But then he paused, looking directly at his daughters. "But you know what? I recently learned something very important. The biggest, most wonderful thing you can build isn't a company or a skyscraper. It's a family. It's love." As he continued, sharing stories of teamwork, perseverance, and the importance of kindness in any career, Griffin felt a sense of purpose that far surpassed any he had known in the boardroom. The children's enthusiastic questions and Lily and Rose's proud smiles filled him with a joy he had never experienced in his corporate successes. That evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, Lily and Rose excitedly recounted every detail of career day to Naomi. Griffin watched, his heart full, as Naomi listened with rapt attention, praising the girls and sneaking fond glances at him. Later, after the girls had gone to bed, Naomi approached Griffin in his study. "You know," she said softly, "watching you today, with the girls, with their classmates, I fell in love with you all over again." Griffin pulled her close, overwhelmed by emotion. "Naomi," he whispered, "loving you, loving our daughters. It's the best thing I've ever done. I just wish—" "What?" Naomi prompted gently. "I wish I had known," Griffin admitted. 7 years ago, if I had known about the pregnancy, about the threats, I would have left it all behind in a heartbeat. The company, the money, all of it. For you and the girls." Naomi cupped his face in her hands. "I know that now," she said, "and that knowledge, that certainty of your love, it heals so much of the pain from those years apart." As they stood there holding each other, Griffin felt the final pieces of his new life falling into place. The investigation into his family's crimes was progressing, justice would be served, and here, in this home filled with love, he had found his true purpose. The road ahead would still have its challenges. There were legal battles to be fought, a family legacy to reckon with, and years of separation to heal. But Griffin Bennett, once defined by his corporate success, now understood that his greatest achievement was right here, in the love of his family, in the joy of fatherhood, and in the unwavering commitment to protect and cherish the precious gift he had been given. As he held Naomi close, listening to the soft sounds of their daughters sleeping peacefully down the hall, Griffin knew that whatever trials lay ahead, they would face them together. And in that unity, in that love, they were stronger than any force that had tried to tear them apart. As the weeks turned into months, Griffin found himself growing more comfortable in his role as a father and partner. The initial awkwardness of navigating family life gave way to a natural rhythm, filled with small moments of joy and discovery. One Saturday morning, Griffin decided to surprise the family with a trip to the Bronx Zoo. As they wandered through the exhibits, he couldn't help but marvel at the simple pleasure of watching his daughter's eyes light up at each new animal they encountered. "Look, Daddy," Rose exclaimed, pointing excitedly at the penguin enclosure. "They're just like in that movie we watched." Griffin crouched down beside her, sharing in her enthusiasm. "You're right, sweetheart. Do you remember what they're called?" As Rose scrunched up her face in concentration, trying to recall the name, Lily chimed in. "Emperor penguins. They live in Antarctica, and the daddies take care of the eggs." Griffin felt a surge of pride at his daughter's knowledge. "That's exactly right, Lily. Good memory." Naomi, who had been quietly observing the interaction, caught Griffin's eye and smiled warmly. In that moment, surrounded by the chatter of excited children and the calls of exotic animals, Griffin felt a sense of contentment he had never known in his former life of boardrooms and business deals. As they made their way through the zoo, Griffin found himself fielding an endless stream of questions from the twins. Why do giraffes have such long necks? How do polar bears stay warm? Can we get a monkey as a pet? He answered each query patiently, occasionally deferring to the informational plaques when his own knowledge fell short. During a break for lunch, as the girls happily munched on their sandwiches, Naomi leaned in close to Griffin. "You're amazing with them, you know," she said softly. "It's like you've been doing this for years." Griffin felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. "I'm just trying my best," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "They make it easy to want to be better, to learn and grow." As the day wore on, Griffin found himself reflecting on the stark contrast between his current life and the one he had left behind. The pressure of running a multi-billion-dollar corporation seemed trivial compared to the responsibility of shaping 2 young lives. Yet strangely, he felt more fulfilled than ever before. Back at home, as he helped the girls get ready for bed, Griffin was struck by a sudden realization. "You know," he said to Naomi as they tidied up the living room, "I think I want to start a foundation." Naomi looked up from the puzzle she was putting away, intrigued. "What kind of foundation?" Griffin's eyes lit up as he explained his idea. "A foundation to help families in crisis, particularly those who've been victims of corporate bullying or intimidation. We could provide legal aid, financial support, safe housing, all the things you needed when you were forced to run." Naomi's eyes welled with tears as she listened. "Griffin, that's wonderful. You could help so many people." He nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "And I want you to be a part of it, Naomi. Your experience, your strength, it could make a real difference to families going through similar ordeals." As they discussed the idea further, Griffin felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had walked away from his company without regret, but this new venture would allow him to use his wealth and influence for good to prevent others from suffering as Naomi had. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Griffin threw himself into establishing the foundation. He reached out to trusted colleagues, hired a team of dedicated professionals, and began the process of setting up the organization. One evening, as he was working late in his home office, he heard a soft knock at the door. Looking up, he saw Lily standing there, clutching a piece of paper. "What's up, sweetheart?" he asked, gesturing for her to come in. Lily approached his desk, suddenly shy. I drew something for your new job," she said, holding out the paper. Griffin took it, his breath catching in his throat as he looked at the drawing. It showed a simple house with a family standing in front, 2 adults and 2 children. Above it, in wobbly letters, Lily had written, "Daddy's Helper House." "Oh, Lily," Griffin said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is beautiful. Can you tell me about it?" As Lily explained her drawing, talking about how Daddy was going to help other families like theirs, Griffin felt an overwhelming surge of love and pride. His daughter, at just 6 years old, already understood the importance of helping others. "You know what?" he said, pulling Lily onto his lap. "I think Helper House is a perfect name for our foundation. Would it be okay if we used your idea?" Lily's face lit up with excitement. "Really? You want to use my name?" Griffin nodded solemnly. "Absolutely. In fact, how would you and Rose like to help me sometimes? You could draw pictures for the families we help, or maybe we could bake cookies for them together." As Lily nodded enthusiastically, peppering him with ideas, Griffin marveled at how naturally his new role as a father blended with his desire to make a positive impact in the world. The following day, Griffin shared Lily's drawing with the Foundation's team. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with everyone agreeing that Helper House perfectly captured the spirit of their mission. As the foundation took shape, Griffin found himself facing new challenges. Balancing his commitment to the organization with his dedication to his family required careful time management and frequent communication with Naomi. One particularly hectic week, as Griffin juggled foundation meetings and the girls' school events, he noticed Naomi seeming distant and withdrawn. Concerned, he suggested they have a date night, arranging for a trusted sitter to watch the girls. Over dinner at a quiet restaurant, Griffin reached for Naomi's hand. "Talk to me," he said softly. "What's going on?" Naomi hesitated, then sighed. "It's silly," she said, not meeting his eyes. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed, like I don't quite fit into this world you've built." Griffin felt a pang of guilt. In his enthusiasm for the foundation and his new role as a father, had he been neglecting Naomi's needs? "I'm sorry," he said, squeezing her hand. "I never want you to feel that way. This world, as you call it, it's ours, Naomi. We're building it together." As they talked, Griffin realized that Naomi was still struggling to fully embrace their new life. The years of hardship and fear had left deep scars, and the transition to their current lifestyle was more challenging than she had let on. "What if," Griffin suggested, an idea forming, "you took a more active role in the foundation, not just as a consultant but as a co-director? Your experience, your perspective, it's invaluable, Naomi." He watched as a spark of interest lit up her eyes. "You really think I could do that?" "I know you can," Griffin affirmed. "In fact, I think the foundation needs you. Who better to understand and connect with the families we're trying to help?" As they continued to discuss the possibility, Griffin saw a renewed energy in Naomi. She began to share ideas, her natural compassion and insight shining through. By the time they returned home, a plan had begun to take shape. Naomi would join the Foundation's leadership team, focusing particularly on program development and client support. The next morning, as they shared the news with the girls over breakfast, Griffin was struck by how right it all felt. Lily and Rose were thrilled at the idea of both their parents working together to help others, peppering them with questions and suggestions. As the weeks passed, Griffin watched with pride as Naomi flourished in her new role. Her confidence grew, and the haunted look that had lingered in her eyes began to fade. She threw herself into developing programs for the Foundation, drawing on her own experiences to create initiatives that truly addressed the needs of families in crisis. One afternoon, as Griffin observed Naomi leading a team meeting, confidently presenting her ideas for a new outreach program, he felt a swell of emotion. This was the woman he had fallen in love with years ago, strong, compassionate, and full of life. The years of separation had been painful, but seeing her now, he knew that they had both grown in ways that made their bond even stronger. As the meeting concluded, Naomi caught his eye and smiled, a silent acknowledgement of how far they had come. In that moment, Griffin knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as partners, as parents, and as a force for good in the world. The journey of healing and growth was ongoing, but with each passing day the Bennett family grew stronger. The scars of the past remained, but they were now balanced by the joy of the present and the hope for the future. Griffin, once defined by his corporate success, now found his greatest fulfillment in the love of his family and the impact of their shared mission to help others. As he looked around at the life they had built together, a home filled with laughter, a foundation making a real difference in people's lives, and a family bonded by love and shared purpose, Griffin knew that he had found something far more valuable than any business empire. He had found his true calling, his real legacy, in the love of his family and the power of second chances. The day Griffin had been both anticipating and dreading finally arrived. After months of meticulous investigation and preparation, he was ready to confront his mother and uncle with the evidence of their crimes. The tension in the air was palpable as Griffin adjusted his tie, steeling himself for the confrontation ahead. "Are you sure you don't want me to come with you?" Naomi asked. Her eyes filled with concern as she watched Griffin prepare to leave. Griffin shook his head, pulling her into a tight embrace. "No, I need to do this alone. But knowing you and the girls are here supporting me, that's all the strength I need." As he made his way to his mother's opulent Upper East Side townhouse, Griffin's mind raced with the details of what they had uncovered. The evidence was damning. A trail of financial transactions, threatening phone calls and sworn statements from other families who had been similarly intimidated. It was enough to not only destroy his mother and uncle's reputations, but to potentially send them to prison for a very long time. Griffin's hand trembled slightly as he rang the doorbell. The familiar chimes echoed through the house, a sound that once represented comfort but now filled him with dread. The door swung open, revealing his mother, Elizabeth Bennett, impeccably dressed as always, her face a mask of polite curiosity. "Griffin, darling," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "What a pleasant surprise. Come in, come in." As he followed her into the lavish living room, Griffin's eyes fell on his Uncle Charles, who was seated in a high-backed leather chair, a glass of scotch in hand. The older man's eyes narrowed slightly at Griffin's unexpected arrival. "Well, nephew," Charles drawled, "to what do we owe this impromptu family reunion?" Griffin took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "I think you both know why I'm here," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his gut. "It's time we talked about Naomi." The change in the room was instantaneous. Elizabeth's smile faltered, and Charles's hand tightened visibly around his glass. "Naomi," Elizabeth said, her voice carefully controlled. "I thought we had put that unfortunate chapter behind us, dear. After all, it's been what? 7 years? 7 years, 2 months, and 18 days, Griffin replied, his tone icy. 7 years of lies, manipulation, and criminal activity. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Charles stood abruptly, his face flushing with anger. "Now see here, boy." But Griffin cut him off, pulling out a thick folder from his briefcase. "No, you see here, Uncle Charles. I have everything. The money trails, the phone records, the threats. I know what you did to Naomi, to my children." Elizabeth sank onto the sofa, her perfectly manicured hand trembling as she reached for a crystal decanter. "Griffin, darling, you must understand. We only wanted what was best for you, for the family." "Best for me?" Griffin's voice rose, years of pent-up anger finally breaking through. "You threatened the woman I loved. You forced her to flee, to raise my children in poverty and fear. How could that possibly be what's best for me?" He turned to his uncle, who was now pacing the room like a caged animal. "And you, Uncle Charles, threatening a pregnant woman with a gun? Was that part of your grand plan for the family's future?" Charles's face paled. "How did you—" "Naomi told me everything," Griffin interrupted, "and we have the evidence to back it up. Bank records showing large cash withdrawals coinciding with her disappearance, phone logs connecting you to known criminals, and statements from other families you've terrorized over the years." The room fell silent as the weight of Griffin's words sank in. Elizabeth's carefully cultivated composure crumbled, tears streaking her expertly applied makeup. Charles slumped back into his chair, suddenly looking every bit his age. "What do you want, Griffin?" Elizabeth asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Griffin's jaw clenched. "I want justice. For Naomi, for my daughters, and for every other family you've hurt. I'm turning all of this evidence over to the authorities." Charles leapt to his feet, panic clear in his eyes. "You can't. Do you have any idea what this will do to the family name, to the company?" "The company?" Griffin laughed bitterly. "I stepped down months ago, Uncle Charles, or didn't you notice? The Bennett empire you've been so desperate to protect. It doesn't exist anymore. Not in the way you knew it." He turned to his mother, who was watching him with a mixture of fear and something that might have been pride. "Mother, I'm giving you one chance, one opportunity to do the right thing. Turn yourself in, both of you. Confess to what you've done." Elizabeth's eyes widened. "And if we don't?" Griffin's voice was steel. "Then I'll make sure every news outlet in the country knows exactly what kind of people are behind the Bennett name. Every dirty deal, every threat, every life you've ruined, all of it will come to light." The tension in the room was suffocating. Charles paced frantically, muttering to himself, while Elizabeth sat frozen, her world crumbling around her. Finally, Elizabeth spoke, her voice small and defeated. "We'll do it. We'll turn ourselves in." Charles whirled on her. "Elizabeth, no, we can fight this. We have connections, we can—" "It's over, Charles," Elizabeth interrupted, suddenly looking every bit her age. "Griffin's right. It's time we face the consequences of our actions." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Griffin nodded to his mother. "That'll be the detectives. I took the liberty of inviting them to join us." The next few hours passed in a blur of legal jargon and formal statements. Griffin watched as his mother and uncle were led away in handcuffs, a sight that filled him with a complex mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. As he finally left the townhouse, emotionally drained but relieved, Griffin's phone buzzed with a text from Naomi. "How did it go? Are you okay?" Griffin smiled, feeling the weight of years lifting from his shoulders. He typed back a simple response. "It's done. Coming home now. I love you." Driving back to the penthouse, Griffin's mind raced with the implications of what had just transpired. The Bennett family name would be tarnished, perhaps irreparably. The company he had worked so hard to build would likely face serious repercussions. But as he thought of Naomi and their daughters waiting for him, he knew without a doubt that he had made the right choice. As he walked through the door of their home, he was immediately engulfed in a group hug, Naomi and the girls surrounding him with love and support. In that moment, holding his family close, Griffin knew that this love, this unity, was worth more than any empire his mother and uncle had tried to protect. The road ahead would be challenging. There would be trials, both literal and figurative. The media frenzy would be intense, and rebuilding their lives in the aftermath of this revelation would take time. But as Griffin looked at the faces of his loved ones, he felt a sense of peace and purpose that had eluded him for years. This was his real legacy, not the Bennett name or the corporate empire, but the family he had reclaimed and the lives they would touch through their foundation. As he hugged his daughters tightly and kissed Naomi, Griffin Bennett knew that the best chapters of his life were still to come. The fallout from the confrontation was immediate and far-reaching. News of the Bennett family scandal broke like a tidal wave, dominating headlines and sending shockwaves through the business world. Griffin found himself at the center of a media storm, his phone ringing incessantly with calls from journalists, former colleagues, and even distant relatives he hadn't spoken to in years. In the days that followed, Griffin worked tirelessly to protect his family from the onslaught of attention. He hired additional security for the penthouse and arranged for the girls to be homeschooled temporarily to shield them from the inevitable gossip and questions at their school. Naomi, showing a strength that continually amazed Griffin, stepped up to handle much of the public relations aspect. She gave a single, powerful interview to a respected journalist, sharing their story with dignity and grace. Her words resonated with the public, turning what could have been a tawdry scandal into a story of resilience and redemption. As the legal proceedings against Elizabeth and Charles Bennett began, Griffin found himself grappling with complex emotions. Despite their actions, they were still his family. The sight of his mother in a prison jumpsuit looking small and defeated in the courtroom stirred a mix of pity and lingering anger in him. One evening, as he sat on the balcony, lost in thought, Naomi joined him, wrapping a comforting arm around his shoulders. "You did the right thing, Griffin," she said softly. "I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you did." Griffin nodded, leaning into her embrace. "I know. It's just, I keep thinking about all the years we lost, all the pain you went through, and for what? A family legacy that was built on lies and intimidation." Naomi turned his face towards hers, her eyes filled with love and determination. "We can't change the past, Griffin, but we can shape the future. Think about all the families we're going to help through the foundation. That's the legacy you're building now." Her words struck a chord in Griffin, reigniting the sense of purpose that had driven him to confront his family in the first place. He pulled Naomi close, overwhelmed with gratitude for her strength and wisdom. The next morning, Griffin called an emergency meeting of the Helper House Foundation Board. As he stood before the group of dedicated individuals they had assembled, he felt a renewed sense of mission. "What's happened with my family has shown us just how crucial our work is," he began. "There are countless families out there who have been victimized by corporate greed and intimidation. We have a unique opportunity now to reach them, to offer them hope and practical support." The team listened intently as Griffin outlined his vision for expanding their operations. They would set up a legal aid division, specifically to help families navigate the complexities of standing up to powerful corporations. They would establish a network of safe houses across the country for families who needed to relocate quickly, and they would launch a public awareness campaign to encourage other victims to come forward. As the meeting progressed, ideas flowed freely. The energy in the room was palpable, a sense of shared purpose uniting everyone present. Griffin caught Naomi's eye across the table, seeing his own excitement mirrored in her expression. In the weeks that followed, the foundation's work took on a new urgency. Griffin and Naomi threw themselves into the expansion plans, working long hours but energized by the impact they were making. The girls too became involved, often accompanying their parents to community events and charming everyone they met, with their enthusiasm for helping other families like ours. One particularly memorable day, the foundation hosted an open house for families they had assisted. As Griffin stood at the podium, preparing to give a speech, he saw Lily tugging at Naomi's sleeve, whispering urgently. After a moment's hesitation, Naomi nodded and led both girls up to the stage. Griffin raised an eyebrow questioningly, but Naomi just smiled and gestured for him to continue. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak, sharing the foundation's mission and their plans for the future. As he talked about the importance of family and second chances, he felt a small hand slip into his. Looking down, he saw Rose standing beside him, her eyes shining with pride. On his other side, Lily stepped forward, her voice clear and confident as she addressed the crowd. "My daddy and mommy help people who are scared and alone just like we were, but now we're not alone anymore, and we want to help you not be alone too." The room fell silent for a moment before erupting into applause. Griffin felt tears prick his eyes as he gathered his family close, overwhelmed by the moment. This, he realized, was the true measure of wealth, not in dollars or stock options, but in love, purpose, and the ability to make a difference in the world. As the applause died down and the event continued around them, Griffin held his family close, marveling at how far they had come. The pain of the past would always be a part of their story, but it no longer defined them. Instead, it had become the catalyst for something beautiful and meaningful. The Bennett name, once associated with corporate power and ruthless ambition, was being redefined. Now, it stood for compassion, for second chances, and for the unbreakable bonds of family. As Griffin looked out at the room full of people whose lives they had touched, he knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would still have its challenges. The legal battles surrounding his mother and uncle were far from over, and rebuilding their lives in the public eye would take time and patience. But with Naomi by his side, and their daughters as their inspiration, Griffin felt ready to face whatever came their way. As the event wound down and they prepared to head home, Griffin pulled Naomi aside for a moment. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "For what?" she asked, her eyes searching his face. "For everything," Griffin replied, pulling her close. "For your strength, your forgiveness, for giving me a second chance at being a father and a husband, for helping me find a purpose beyond just making money." Naomi smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "We found it together, Griffin. This is our story now, all of us." As they gathered the girls and made their way out of the building, Griffin felt a sense of peace settle over him. The confrontation with his family had been a turning point, a moment of reckoning that had cleared the way for this new chapter in their lives. The Bennett empire of old might have crumbled, but from its ashes something far more valuable had risen. A family united by love, a mission to help others, and a legacy that would ripple out to touch countless lives. As they stepped out into the New York evening, the future stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. In the days following the Foundation's open house, Griffin found himself reflecting on the dramatic turn his life had taken. The media frenzy surrounding his family's scandal had begun to die down, but its effects were still reverberating through every aspect of his world. One morning, as he sat in his home office, reviewing the latest reports from the Foundation, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was a news alert about his mother, Elizabeth Bennett. With a deep breath, Griffin clicked on the link, steeling himself for whatever new development had occurred. The article detailed Elizabeth's decision to plead guilty to all charges, foregoing a trial in exchange for a slightly reduced sentence. Griffin's emotions swirled as he read the statement she had released. I, Elizabeth Bennett, acknowledge the grave errors of my past actions. The pain I have caused my son, his family, and countless others weighs heavily on my conscience. While I cannot undo the harm I've done, I hope that by accepting full responsibility for my actions, I can begin to make amends. To Griffin, Naomi, and my granddaughters, whom I've never had the privilege to know, I am profoundly sorry. Griffin set the phone down, his hands shaking slightly. The apology, unexpected and uncharacteristic of his proud mother, stirred a complex mix of emotions within him. Part of him wanted to dismiss it as a ploy for public sympathy, but another part, the part that still remembered the mother who had once tucked him in at night and kissed his scraped knees, wanted desperately to believe in her sincerity. Lost in thought, he didn't hear Naomi enter the room until she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked, her eyes full of concern as she glanced at the phone on his desk. Griffin nodded slowly, pulling her onto his lap and showing her the article. As Naomi read, her brow furrowed in concentration. When she finished, she looked up at Griffin, her expression thoughtful. "What do you think?" she asked softly. "Do you believe her?" Griffin sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me wants to, but after everything, I just don't know if I can trust her words anymore." Naomi nodded understandingly. "It's okay not to know how you feel right now, Griffin. This is all still so fresh. You don't have to make any decisions about forgiveness or reconciliation right away." As they sat there, holding each other in the quiet of the morning, Griffin felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Naomi's unwavering support, her ability to understand and validate his conflicted feelings, was a balm to his troubled soul. The rest of the day passed in a blur of Foundation work and family time. Griffin threw himself into his tasks with renewed vigor, as if trying to counterbalance the turmoil of his emotions with productive action. But as evening fell, and the girls were tucked into bed, he found himself drawn back to the balcony, staring out at the city lights as he grappled with the implications of his mother's plea. Naomi joined him, wordlessly handing him a glass of wine and leaning against the railing beside him. For a while they stood in comfortable silence, the distant hum of the city a soothing backdrop to their thoughts. Finally, Griffin spoke. "I think I want to visit her," he said quietly, his voice barely audible above the night breeze. Naomi turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "Your mother?" she asked gently. Griffin nodded, taking a sip of his wine to steady himself. "I have so many questions, so much anger still, but I think I need to see her, to try to understand why she did what she did." Naomi reached out, taking his free hand in hers. "If that's what you feel you need to do, I support you," she said. "Do you want me to come with you?" Griffin squeezed her hand gratefully. "No, I think this is something I need to do on my own. But knowing you're here, supporting me, that means everything." The next morning, Griffin made the necessary arrangements. As he prepared to leave for the correctional facility where his mother was being held, he felt a tugging at his sleeve. Looking down, he saw Lily and Rose, their eyes wide with concern. "Daddy, where are you going?" Lily asked, her lower lip trembling slightly. Griffin knelt down, gathering both girls into a hug. "I'm going to see your grandmother," he explained gently. "She did some bad things, but she's trying to say sorry now. I need to talk to her to understand why she did those things." Rose's brow furrowed in confusion, Is she a bad person? She asked innocently. Griffin paused, considering his words carefully. People aren't always just good or bad, sweetheart, he said finally. Sometimes good people make bad choices. What's important is that we try to learn from our mistakes and do better. As he stood to leave, both girls hugged him tightly. We love you, Daddy, they chorused. I love you too, Griffin replied, his heart swelling with emotion. So much. The drive to the correctional facility was tense, Griffin's mind racing with all the things he wanted to say, to ask. As he was led through security and into the visitation area, he felt his resolve wavering. But then he thought of Naomi, of their daughters, of all the families they were helping through the foundation. He drew strength from the love and purpose he had found, squaring his shoulders as he entered the room. Elizabeth Bennet sat at a small table, her usual impeccable appearance dulled by the drab prison uniform. As Griffin approached, he saw a flicker of emotion cross her face, hope, fear, regret, before she schooled her features into a neutral expression. Griffin, she said softly as he sat down across from her. Thank you for coming. Griffin nodded, his throat tight with unshed tears and unspoken words. For a moment neither of them spoke, the weight of years of pain and misunderstanding hanging heavy between them. Finally, Griffin broke the silence. Why? He asked, his voice cracking slightly. Why did you do it, Mom? Was your idea of our family's legacy really worth destroying actual families? Elizabeth's carefully composed facade crumbled, tears welling in her eyes. I thought I was protecting you, she whispered, protecting everything we'd built. I was so afraid of losing it all, of seeing you throw away your future on love? Griffin finished, a hint of bitterness in his tone. On happiness? Elizabeth nodded, shame evident in her posture. I was wrong, Griffin. So terribly, unforgivably wrong. Seeing you now, hearing about the work you're doing with your foundation, I realize that you've built a legacy far greater than anything I could have imagined for you. As they continued to talk, Griffin felt layers of anger and hurt begin to peel away. He shared stories of Naomi, of the girls, of the lives they were changing through Helper House. With each word, he saw his mother's expression shift, moving from regret to a tentative hope. I know I have no right to ask, Elizabeth said as their time drew to a close, but do you think, someday, I might be able to meet my granddaughters? Griffin paused, conflicting emotions warring within him. Finally he spoke. I can't make any promises, he said carefully, but if you continue to show genuine remorse, if you use your time here to reflect and grow, maybe someday we can consider it. As he left the facility, Griffin felt as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The conversation with his mother hadn't erased the pain of the past, but it had opened a door to the possibility of healing, of forgiveness. Driving home, Griffin's mind was clearer than it had been in months. The confrontation with his family, the subsequent fallout, and now this tentative step towards reconciliation. It all felt like the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. As he walked through the door of their penthouse, he was immediately enveloped in a group hug, Naomi and the girls surrounding him with love and support. In that moment, holding his family close, Griffin knew that this love, this unity, was the true legacy he wanted to build. The road ahead would still have its challenges. There would be difficult conversations, public scrutiny to navigate, and the ongoing work of the foundation. But as Griffin looked at the faces of his loved ones, he felt a sense of peace and purpose that had eluded him for years. This was his real empire, not the Bennet name or the corporate power, but the family he had reclaimed and the lives they would touch through their work. As he hugged his daughters tightly and kissed Naomi, Griffin Bennet knew that the best chapters of his life were still to come. The future stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. And whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, stronger for the trials they had overcome, and united by a love that had withstood the test of time and adversity. The months following Griffin's confrontation with his family were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media scrutiny, and personal growth. As the dust began to settle, the Bennet family found themselves navigating a new reality, one filled with both challenges and opportunities. The legal resolution of the case against Griffin's mother and uncle came swiftly. Elizabeth Bennet's guilty plea had set the tone, and Charles Bennet, faced with overwhelming evidence, eventually followed suit. The sentencing hearing was a somber affair, attended by Griffin and Naomi, who sat stoically as the judge delivered her verdict. Charles Bennett received a 15-year prison sentence for his role in the threats and financial crimes. The image of his once powerful uncle being led away in handcuffs was one that would stay with Griffin for years to come. Elizabeth, having cooperated fully with the authorities and shown remorse, was sentenced to 8 years, with the possibility of parole after 5. As Griffin left the courthouse that day, hand in hand with Naomi, he felt a complex mix of emotions. There was relief that justice had been served, sadness for the family relationships that had been irreparably damaged, and a renewed determination to use his resources and influence for good. "Are you okay?" Naomi asked softly, as they made their way through the throng of reporters. Griffin squeezed her hand, offering a small smile. "I will be," he replied. "We all will be." With the legal battles behind them, Naomi threw herself into a project she had been passionate about since their reunion, the community center. Drawing on her experiences during the years she spent struggling to raise the twins alone, Naomi envisioned a place that would offer support, resources, and hope to families in crisis. Griffin watched with pride and admiration as Naomi poured her heart and soul into the project. She conducted extensive research, met with social workers and community leaders, and drafted detailed plans for the center's programs and services. One evening, as they sat surrounded by blueprints and program outlines, Griffin marveled at Naomi's transformation. The scared, vulnerable woman he had reunited with months ago had blossomed into a confident, passionate advocate for those in need. "You know," he said, drawing her attention away from the papers spread before her, "watching you work on this, it reminds me of all the reasons I fell in love with you in the first place." Naomi blushed, her eyes shining with emotion. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Griffin. Your support, your belief in me, it's given me the strength to dream big." As they sat there, discussing their vision for the community center and the impact it could have, an idea began to form in Griffin's mind. It was time, he realized, to take the next step in their journey together. The following week, under the guise of scouting potential locations for the community center, Griffin took Naomi on a surprise trip to the Hamptons. As they walked along the beach at sunset, the sound of waves lapping at the shore, Griffin knew the moment was right. Dropping to one knee in the sand, he pulled out a small velvet box. "Naomi," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "7 years ago, we were torn apart on the eve of what should have been the happiest day of our lives. But fate, or maybe just sheer determination, brought us back together. You've given me the greatest gifts I could ever ask for, our beautiful daughters, your forgiveness, and a second chance at love. Will you marry me and make our family complete?" Tears streaming down her face, Naomi nodded emphatically. "Yes," she whispered, pulling Griffin to his feet and into a passionate embrace. 1,000 times, yes. The news of their engagement was met with joyous celebration from the twins and a flurry of excitement from their friends and colleagues at the foundation. As they began to plan their wedding, both Griffin and Naomi were adamant that it should reflect their new values and the life they had built together. Instead of the lavish society affair that had been planned years ago, they opted for an intimate ceremony in the garden of their new home, a spacious brownstone they had purchased to accommodate their growing family and provide a more grounded environment for the girls. The wedding preparations became a family affair, with Lily and Rose eagerly involved in every decision, from flower selections to cake tastings. Griffin found himself marveling at how different this experience was from their first engagement. Where once there had been pressure to impress and conform to societal expectations, now there was only joy, love, and a sense of rightness. As the big day approached, Griffin and Naomi faced one final hurdle, deciding whether to invite Elizabeth to the wedding. After much soul-searching and discussion, they decided to extend an invitation, albeit with strict security measures in place. It was a step towards healing, they agreed, and a chance for Elizabeth to see the beautiful family her actions had nearly destroyed. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, the garden a riot of colorful blooms and twinkling lights. As Griffin stood at the altar, watching Naomi walk towards him, flanked by their beaming daughters, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Despite all the pain and hardship they had endured, they had found their way back to each other, stronger and more in love than ever. Elizabeth, granted a supervised day release to attend the ceremony, sat quietly in the back, tears streaming down her face as she watched her son pledge his love and commitment to Naomi. It was a bittersweet moment, filled with regret for the past and hope for the future. As Griffin and Naomi sealed their vows with a kiss, cheers erupted from their gathered friends and family. The air was filled with joy, love, and the promise of new beginnings. The reception that followed was a joyous celebration of love and family. Griffin and Naomi shared their first dance as husband and wife, their eyes locked on each other as if they were the only two people in the world. Later, Griffin danced with each of his daughters, his heart swelling with love as he twirled them around the floor. As the evening wore on, Griffin found a moment to approach his mother. Elizabeth stood awkwardly at the edge of the party, clearly unsure of her place in this new family dynamic. "Mum," Griffin said softly, causing her to start slightly. "Thank you for coming. It means a lot to us." Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for inviting me, Griffin. Your family, they're beautiful. You've built something wonderful here." Griffin nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "We have," he agreed. "And while we can't change the past, maybe we can work on building a better future for all of us." As he rejoined Naomi on the dance floor, Griffin felt a sense of peace settle over him. They had weathered the storm, confronted the ghosts of their past, and emerged stronger for it. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but together they could face anything. The community center, set to open in a few months, stood as a testament to their commitment to giving back and making a difference. Their daughters were thriving, growing into kind, compassionate young women, and their love, tested by time and adversity, had proven unbreakable. As the night drew to a close, Griffin and Naomi stood hand in hand, watching their guests depart. The garden was still aglow with twinkling lights, casting a magical sparkle over the scene. "So, Mrs. Bennet," Griffin said, pulling Naomi close, "are you ready for our next adventure?" Naomi smiled up at him, her eyes shining with love and excitement. "With you? Always." As they shared a tender kiss, the first stars of the evening twinkling above them, Griffin knew that this was just the beginning. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, as a family bound by love, strengthened by adversity, and committed to making the world a better place. The Bennet name, once associated with corporate power and ruthless ambition, now stood for something far greater: love, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of family. And as Griffin held his wife close, their daughter's laughter echoing in the background, he knew that this was the legacy he was truly meant to build. 5 years had passed since Griffin and Naomi's wedding day, and the Bennet family gathered once again in the garden of their brownstone home. This time, they were celebrating the grand opening of the Helper House Community Center, the culmination of years of hard work, dedication, and love. The garden, once the site of their intimate wedding ceremony, was now transformed into a vibrant space filled with community members, local officials, and families who had been touched by the Bennet's foundation. Colorful banners hung from trees, and the air was filled with the excited chatter of children and adults alike. Griffin stood at the podium, his hand intertwined with Naomi's as he prepared to give the opening speech. At 43, he had a few more gray hairs at his temples, but his eyes sparkled with the same determination and love that had driven him to rebuild his life 5 years ago. "Welcome, everyone," Griffin began, his voice strong and clear. "Today marks not just the opening of a building, but the realization of a dream born from adversity and nurtured by hope." As he spoke about the journey that had led them to this moment, Griffin's eyes swept over the crowd. He saw Lily and Rose, now 12 years old, standing proudly beside the poster they had created, detailing the center's programs. They had grown into compassionate, driven young women, already showing signs of the change makers they would become. In the back of the crowd, Griffin spotted a familiar face that made his heart skip a beat. His mother, Elizabeth, stood quietly, her posture humble but her eyes shining with pride. Released from prison a year ago, she had been working tirelessly to make amends, volunteering at the foundation, and slowly rebuilding her relationship with her family. "This center," Griffin continued, "is a testament to the power of second chances, of love that endures, and of the strength we find in community. It stands as a beacon of hope for those who feel lost, a reminder that no one has to face their struggles alone." Naomi stepped forward then, her hand still firmly in Griffin's. "Helper House is more than just a building," she added, her voice filled with emotion. "It's a promise that we will stand together, lift each other up, and create a world where every family has the support and resources they need to thrive." As they officially cut the ribbon, cheers erupted from the crowd. Griffin pulled Naomi close, planting a kiss on her forehead as tears of joy glistened in both their eyes. They had come so far from that fateful day when they reunited on a busy New York street. The celebration continued into the evening, with tours of the new facility, demonstrations of the programs, and heartfelt testimonials from families who had been helped by the foundation. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the garden, Griffin found a quiet moment to reflect. He watched as Lily and Rose excitedly showed Elizabeth around the art therapy room they had helped design. The sight of his mother interacting with her granddaughters, her face alight with genuine joy, filled Griffin with a complex mix of emotions. The path to forgiveness had been long and challenging, but moments like these reminded him of the healing power of love and second chances. Naomi appeared at his side, slipping her arm around his waist. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked softly. Griffin smiled, pulling her close. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," he replied. 5 years ago I couldn't have imagined this. Us, the girls, my mother, this center, it's more than I ever dared to hope for." Naomi nodded, her eyes misty with emotion. "We've been through so much," she said, "but look at what we've built from the ashes of our past. It's beautiful, Griffin." As they stood there watching their family and community mingle, Griffin felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. The pain of the past would always be a part of their story, but it no longer defined them. Instead, it had become the catalyst for something beautiful and meaningful. The Bennett name, once associated with corporate power and ruthless ambition, now stood for compassion, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Helper House would go on to touch countless lives, a legacy far greater than any business empire. As the evening wound down, Griffin gathered his family close. Lily and Rose, their faces glowing with excitement from the day's events, snuggled between him and Naomi. Elizabeth stood nearby, a tentative but genuine smile on her face. "I am so proud of all of us," Griffin said, his voice thick with emotion. "We've faced unimaginable challenges, but we've come through them stronger, more compassionate, and more united than ever." Naomi squeezed his hand, adding, "And this is just the beginning. Think of all the families we'll help, all the lives we'll touch. Our story, with all its pain and triumph, will give hope to others facing their own struggles." As they stood there, bathed in the soft glow of the garden lights, Griffin felt a surge of gratitude for the twists of fate that had led them to this moment. The road had been long and often painful, but every step had been worth it. The future stretched out before them, full of promise and possibility. There would undoubtedly be new challenges to face, but Griffin knew that together they could overcome anything. Their love, tested by time and adversity, had proven unbreakable. Their family, forged in the fires of hardship, stood strong and united. As the last of the guests departed and the garden fell quiet, Griffin took one last look around. The Helper House Community Center stood as a monument to their journey, a journey of love lost and found, of family torn apart and reunited, of a legacy reimagined and rebuilt. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of his family's love, Griffin Bennett knew that this love, this purpose, this legacy of compassion was the true measure of a life well lived. And as he led his family back into their home, his heart full to bursting, he looked forward to whatever adventures tomorrow might bring. For in the end, it wasn't the wealth or the power that defined them. It was the love they shared, the lives they touched, and the hope they inspired. And that, Griffin realized, was the greatest fortune of all. If you enjoyed this story, leave a rating from 0 to 10, along with the city you're watching from. We'd love to know what you thought and where you're watching us from. And if you missed our last story, here's what happened. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. The wealthy wife, betrayed and humiliated, stared at her husband and his lover with a calmness that made everyone uncomfortable. But when she stood up and announced a surprise witness, the room fell into absolute silence. The door opened, and the impossible happened. The husband's face drained of all color, as if his worst nightmare had just materialized. Who walked into the room, and why was he so terrified of this person? This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about justice, twists, and how a single moment can change everything. Curious to uncover everything that went down in that courtroom? Click on the video now appearing on your screen and dive into the gripping conclusion of this incredible story. See you there.